What's up, folks? Mike for CMCC Builds here with character build number 4, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Peter Parker, the Night Monkey, Underoos, the Billion-Dollar Man. Arguably the most popular comic book character in the world, at least if Google searches over the last 15 years, and my mid-90s comic book collection are any indicator. Sorry, X-Men. So because of the character's popularity and the nature of the builds, this is going to be a 2-part series. Today's build will focus on the traditional Spider-Man, the wall-crawling, web-slinging, radioactive bitten superhero. We'll create a hand-to-hand specialist with no armor that uses his wrist-mounted web shooters to control his enemies and the battlefield. In part 2 of the series, we'll focus on some of the different versions and suits of Spider-Man. There'll be very different builds that work great on their own, but also serve to give you a ton of options to make your very own Spidey, if that's the road you want to go down. I just wanted to take a quick moment to say that if you enjoy the content and appreciate the detail and work that goes into making it, which I hope shows in the final product, please like or comment, or if you're so inclined, share the videos with your friends or on the forums like 3D6 or Giant in the Playground or wherever else to help grow the channel. And if not, that's cool too. I still greatly appreciate your time here. Okay, with that preamble out of the way, let's jump into the build. When it comes to race, Peter Parker is clearly a human. Despite there being good options with variant human, custom lineage, and others, for me, the clear best choice is actually the Dampier. To become Spider-Man, Peter was bitten by a radioactive spider instead of a vampire, but the idea of a human permanently changed because of a bite works from a flavor perspective. Mechanically, we get 2 quality abilities that we need, and 1 must-have trait that we simply cannot pass up. For ability scores, we'll use the +2 to 1 stat and then +1 to another, rather than +1 to 3 stats. For size, we're medium. Base speed here is 35 instead of the more common 30 for most races, which is great for us. Any ability that ups speed and or mobility is something we're certainly going to want for this build. The Dampier's Ancestral Legacy provides 2 proficiencies. I'm going to recommend taking Perception because of Spider-Man's Spidey sense. Perception is right up there with speed and mobility as essential traits that we'll want to increase as much as possible. This, along with a few other class features, will do a solid job of mimicking Spider-Man's Spidey sense. For the second proficiency, my suggestion is to go with Investigation. There really isn't a great skill that represents science prowess. Arcana is kind of close, but not really. There's History, but that doesn't quite fit. Investigation covers the ability to research and pore through books in search of knowledge, so this works as a decent proxy for a great scientific mind. Next, we get Dark Vision, which we'll use to represent Spidey's enhanced vision. It's not exactly seeing in the dark, but after the bite, Peter is overwhelmed with visual information to the point that he needs dark goggles to reduce that visual input. This can certainly be used to see better in darkness, so we'll happily take Dark Vision, D&D's best trait for improved vision. Dampiers then get Deathless Nature. They don't need to breathe. This doesn't fit. Ignore it. We also get Vampiric Bite, a D4 Constitution-based attack that, when empowered, do some interesting things like regaining hit points or giving a bonus to ability checks. Again, this doesn't work for us, so we'll ignore it. But we certainly won't ignore the final ability of the Dampier, which is the primary reason we went with this lineage. Here we get Spider Climb. This is an essential ability for any Spider-Man build, and here we get it with a racial trait, which is absolutely perfect. We get a climbing speed equal to our walking speed, and at 3rd level, this ability allows us to move up, down, and across vertical surfaces and upside down along ceilings while leaving our hands free. Already with our race lineage, we've covered the wall crawling and the radioactive bitten, off to a good start. The ability scores that we want are Strength 8, Dexterity 15, Constitution 14, Intelligence 10, Wisdom 15, and Charisma 8. As always, quick reminder that we're not attempting to recreate the physical and mental attributes of the character in question. Here we're concerned about game mechanics, and what we need to excel in specific areas along with meeting multi-class requirements. The best way to handle physical and mental attributes is through skill proficiencies and expertise, which we will certainly do, rather than spreading our ability scores too thin, or investing precious ASIs into stats with no real mechanical advantage tied to it. For our racial ASIs, ability score improvements, take the +2 in Dexterity and +1 in Wisdom. That'll bring Dex to 17 and Wisdom to 16. Let's do a custom background to get 2 skill and tool proficiencies, along with the folk hero background feature, Rustic Hospitality. This ribbon feature allows us to find a place to hide, rest, or recuperate among other commoners like us, which is thematic for a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. They will also shield you from the law or anyone else searching for you. Your secret identity is safe with them. For skills, I'm going to take Sleight of Hand and Intimidation. Sleight of Hand for some additional dexterous abilities, and Intimidation as the first of many abilities that represent Spider-Man's ability to riff and mock enemies. He's always quick with a quip. For For tools, take alchemist supplies because Peter is a scientist who invents his own web shooters and webbing, among other things. And then I went with Weaver's tools because he designs and makes his own costumes. Tinker tools is another quality option. For our starting class, there are a lot of possibilities, even among the several classes that we'll be taking for this version of Spider-Man. But I think the best option for us is to start with Fighter. We get 10 hit points, which is slightly better than some of the other classes we'll take, proficiency with martial weapons, heavy armor and shields, none of which we'll actually use. We get proficiency in both strength and constitution saving throws. This will actually be quite important for us, as there are some spells that we'll be concentrating on quite a bit. We get 2 skill proficiencies, and I'll recommend taking both athletics and acrobatics. That means right at level 1, we have a climbing speed equal to our walking speed and proficiency in the 2 most important physical skills Spider-Man possesses. We get a fighting style, and this is non-negotiable. Spider-Man doesn't use weapons. He controls his enemies via webs and beats them up with his hands and feet. We need unarmed fighting, which allows us to deal bludgeoning damage equal to 1d6 plus strength mod, or if we aren't wielding any weapons or a shield, the damage increases to 1d8 plus strength mod. That's great, except our strength sucks, so it's not great. But don't worry, we'll fix that next level. Right now, we just got bit by that spider and we're working out our powers. We can climb walls, but we can't walk on ceilings with no hands yet. We can do some solid damage with our strikes, but haven't quite locked down the technique, so we're not hitting or doing as much damage as we can yet. And finally, we get Second Wind, which allows for a D10 plus fighter level heal as a bonus action. This represents Spidey's healing factor, but to be fair, every single D&D character has a built-in healing factor via short and long rests, so this is nice, but not essential to the build. At level 2, we're once again going to delay extra attack and multi-class right into Monk. We need to make our unarmed attacks with dexterity and not strength, and the only way to make that happen is through the Monk's martial arts feature. Along with using dex, we can also use a d4 for our attack rolls, except we already use a d8, so we'll ignore this feature. And when we use the attack action with an unarmed strike, we can make 1 additional unarmed strike as a bonus action. So right from level 2, we can attack twice, not bad. At this level, we also get unarmored defense, which combines dex and wisdom mods to determine our AC. Since we're not including any of Spider-Man's special suits in this build, he won't ever wear armor, so this feature is essential to making this version of the build function. Now, there are some arguments to be made for sticking with Monk at least through level 7 for unarmored movement, slow fall, extra attack, and evasion, but I think we have some better options, including a primary class for this build, which we'll multi-class into right now, Ranger. So at level 3, using Tasha's optional Ranger features at level 1, we get Deft Explorer, which gives us 2 languages. MCU, Peter Parker speaks a bit of Spanish and Italian, so with our 2 languages, take whatever you like. I'll pick Dwarvish and Elvish because why not? We also get a version of Expertise in 1 skill, and here we should take Acrobatics. This is Spider-Man after all. We need to max out Acrobatics ASAP. We also get an additional skill proficiency. I'll take Stealth, which is important for all that wall hopping, ceiling crawling, sneaking around Spidey does. And finally, we get Favored Foe, which gives us a d4 on our first attack against an enemy. This increases to a d6 at 6th and a d8 at 14th level. This is not bad, but it does require concentration, which limits its effectiveness for us past this level. It should be noted that we have hit character level 3, so our spider climb feature became fully functional. We've practiced hard, and now we can climb on ceilings with no hands needed. We still haven't built those web shooters. Don't worry, they're on the way. At level 4, we're a Ranger 2. We get a fighting style. Here, we definitely want Druidic Warrior, so we can get 2 Druid cantrips. The first one we're going to take, you probably guessed it, is Thorn Whip. The most basic function of our web shooters, it shoots from our hand, wraps a single enemy, and drags them toward us. They fail their strength save. It can be tough to maneuver those really strong enemies. Thorn Whip does a d6 damage, which will scale to 2d6 next level. This is a good start for our web shooters. For the second cantrip, I'll suggest Mending, which, given Peter's proclivity for tinkering and scientific inventiveness, including the web shooters themselves, this pick makes sense. I toyed with the idea of using Magic Stone as an additional ranged attack that mimics the web balls Spidey shoots at enemies, often to trap a hand against a wall or cover someone's eyes or mouth, but it just doesn't quite fit. If you like it, go for it. At this level, we'll also get 2 first level spells known. Here we should take Entangle, which restrains creatures in a 20-foot square starting from a point within 90 feet. Instead of weeds and vines, this will obviously be webs from our web shooters and begins our journey as a battlefield controlling marshal. For the second spell, there are a lot of good options, but I think we have to take Jump. It might not be a great spell, but we are building Spider-Man. We need Jump. At level 5, Ranger 3, we get our Ranger archetype, and we have a really strong option in the Swarm Keeper. Thematically, spiders, insect swarms, we're not Ant-Man, but that's okay because mechanically we get a lot of great features. The primary Swarm Keeper feature at this level is Gathered Swarm. What we're going to do is replace all instances of the word swarm with web and see how well this feature fits. Once each turn, on a hit, add 1d6 piercing damage from the webs. Webs don't really pierce, but additional damage is always nice. We can force the target to make a strength save against our spell DC, or be moved by the webs up to 15 feet horizontally in a direction of our choice. Yes please, this is perfect. All we need to do is hit with an attack, Thorn Whip, or unarmored attacks, hit with one of those, toss the enemy around the map. We can also choose to have the webs move us 5 feet horizontally in any direction of our choice. So hit with your attacks, then shoot a quick web to pull yourself out of the enemy's reach. Again, perfect. We also get additional spells with Swarmkeeper magic. We get the Mage Hand cantrip, which takes the form of our webs, and Fairy Fire, which is obviously a good first level spell that we can flavor as Spider-Man's heightened senses, allowing for more accurate strikes and increased visibility of enemies. But our concentration is almost certainly going to be used on Entangle, or maybe Favorite Foe if we run out of spell slots, so it's unlikely we'll ever cast this spell. For our additional spell known, I'd take Snare here. If there's one thing Spider-Man loves to do, it's snare the bad guys. The spell takes a minute to cast, which kind of sucks, but in the absence of spells like Tiny Hut, this is an okay option for long rests, setting traps, or unsuspecting enemies. At this level, we also get Primeval Awareness, or Primal Awareness from Tasha's. Primal Awareness is a much better feature. It provides additional situational spells that can be helpful, and they're free, which is even better, and exactly what you want out of a situational spell. But this is more rangery type spells and doesn't really fit with the Spider-Man archetype we're building. So I'm sticking with Primal Awareness, which allows us to expend a spell slot and an action to sense whether aberrations, celestials, dragons, elementals, fae, fiends, or undead are within 1 mile of us. Not where they are, just that they're there. This is awful, but it's kind of got a Spidey sense mechanical feel, so I'm going with this. We need to start building our Spidey sense capabilities, and this is a start, just not a very good one. Level 6, Ranger 4, no additional spells known, but we do get an ASI or feat. Here, let's take Resilient Dexterity. That gives us a +1 in Dex to get us to 18, and also gives us proficiency in Dexterity saving throws. This serves 2 purposes. Spider-Man is obviously incredibly agile, and in addition, he has his Spidey sense, so he gets a heads up on any incoming harm. We want to bump our Dex saves as high as possible because of this. And here at level 7, we're taking another Ranger level to bring us to Ranger 5. And with that comes extra attack. Levels 5 and 6 were tough from a damage perspective, but we have Favorite Foe and our bonus action martial arts attack to help pick up the slack. Remember, Spider-Man isn't just a rush into battle martial character, he's a battlefield controller, restraining and even grappling enemies. Don't forget the D4 extra damage from the unarmed fighting style, and moving them around the battlefield with the Swarmkeeper webs and Thorn Whips. In addition to extra attack, Rangers get 2nd level spells at 5th level, and as a Swarmkeeper, we get the big one, Web. We conjure a mass of thick, sticky webbing at a point within range. It fills a 20-foot cube. It's difficult terrain and lightly obscures the area, but more importantly, any creature that starts its turn in the webs or enters into the webs must make a Dex saving throw or be restrained until it can break free, which is a strength check against our spell DC. I mean, it's the web spell. Creates a web. It restrains enemies. What else can we say about it? It also happens to be an amazing 2nd level spell that continues to be effective even at high level play. All of our 2nd level slots will probably be used on this spell, and when creatures make their way out of the web, just use your Swarmkeeper web movement to toss them back in, or Thorn Whip webs to pull them back in. We also get an additional spell known, and even though there are some really solid 1st level options for the character, I think we should go with Silence here. Even though it's a silent sphere of 20-foot radius, we need a way to duplicate the blast of webbing to people's faces, and this does a decent job of that. Just flavor it as shooting a web on anyone's mouth that steps into the sphere, and they rip it off by the time they move out of the sphere. Blindness Deafness would have been a decent option for the same effect, but over the eyes instead of the mouth. Unfortunately, we don't have access to that spell. Level 8, we're going to leave Ranger for a bit to focus on mobility, agility, web-like abilities, and some additional damage. To do that, we're going to multi-class into Rogue. At Rogue 1, we get another skill proficiency. We have all the physical and mental must-haves, so I'll recommend taking Sleight of Hand for some additional dexterous abilities. We get expertise in 2 more skills. Athletics and Perception are must-haves for this build. We get Thieves' Cant, which is mostly flavor and not much good for us. And we get Sneak Attack, which would normally allow us to do an additional 1d6 damage once per turn, not round. But you need to use Finesse or ranged weapons to apply Sneak Attack damage, which we do not have. Unarmed strikes are not considered Finesse weapons. Jeremy Crawford apparently has never seen peak Floyd Mayweather box. So as it stands, unless you have a lenient and reasonable DM, no sneak attack with unarmed strikes. At level 9, we're a Rogue 2 and we get Cunning Action, which adds to our mobility and agility options. We can take the Dash, Disengage, or Hide action as a bonus action. At this point, it makes sense to reassess our battle tactics. Getting an additional attack with our bonus action may not be as effective as using a bonus action for other purposes like dashing or disengaging or hiding or casting a spell. Because of that, I'll recommend getting a Sling. This will double as a web sling that you're using to pick up rocks and fling them at enemies. This has the added bonus of working with sneak attack and not having the loading property, so we can use both attacks. Remember to put the sling away if you plan to attack with unarmed strikes, so you can use your martial arts ability and attack with dex instead of strength. Level 10, we're a rogue 3 and get our roguish archetype. And there are not a lot of great options here. It boiled down to Scout, which gave us some extra movement and really nothing else, or Arcane Trickster, which thematically doesn't fit at all, but there are a few spells that we really want to mimic some of our web shooting skills. We get Mage Hand Legerdemain, which allows our Mage Hand to become invisible, which we will never do because Mage Hand is our web. This also allows us to stow one object in a container, retrieve an object in a container, or use Thieves' Tools to pick locks and disarm traps. Basically, we're getting really good with our web slinging. I honestly don't think any of these abilities are out of bounds for Spider-Man's web skills. Maybe picking locks, but even that I can see him doing in the right circumstance. In addition to Mage Hand, which we already have through Swarmkeeper, we get 2 other cantrips and 2 first level spells known. For cantrips, the options aren't particularly appealing, so I'll recommend Message, which works as a communication device as we've seen in previous builds, and Mind Sliver, which will be one of a few spells that will function as a way for us to represent Spidey's extreme trash talking that he does during battles. Spidey's quips make us laugh, but they get inside the heads of his enemies, often throwing them off their game and giving him a slight advantage during battle. For first level spells, we definitely want Featherfall. When someone is falling, you can use your reaction to shoot some elastic webs in their direction and gently lower them to safety. I'd also take Silvery Barbs here, obviously a very powerful spell and controversial. This is another spell where we get inside enemies' heads and throw them off their game. In this case, we force them to re-roll and use the lower roll while giving another creature, including us, advantage on the next attack, ability check, or saving throw. For our third spell, take Tasha's Hideous Laughter for the same reason as Silvery Barbs. Spidey's quips are too much for enemies to handle. Unfortunately, we have an intelligence of 10, so our save DC is pretty low for this level, so choose your targets wisely. Try to use the spell only on someone or something with low wisdom saves. At this level, sneak attack increases to 2d6, so don't hesitate to use that web sling. Staying with Rogue at level 11, we get an ASIR feat. Now is a good time to max out Dex. We also get an additional spell known. Color Spray does a good job of covering Spidey's ability to shoot a web over someone's eyes and temporarily blind them. This spell is based on enemy hit points, so use it against weaker enemies rather than tougher ones with lots of hit points. This spell doesn't have a saving throw, which is important because our intelligence is not good. Level 12, Rogue 5, our sneak attack increases to 3d6 per turn, and we get Uncanny Dodge, another agility ability that allows us to reduce the damage of a single attack by half. Rogue 6 brings us to level 13, and we get Expertise and 2 skills. I'll take Investigation to represent Peter's genius level intellect, and Sleight of Hand, another dexterity-based ability that finalizes the physical skills Spidey possesses. Level 14, Rogue 7, and we finally get Evasion. Our Spidey sense approaches full power as we can now make dexterity saving throws and take 0 damage instead of half, and half damage instead of full if we fail. With proficiency and max dex, we should rarely fail. Sneak attack has also increased to 46. We also get another spell known and second level spells. Here I would take Hold Person because we can only select enchantment or illusion spells, and there just aren't a lot of great options for us in these schools of magic. Hold Person can be flavored as your spells wrapping someone up and incapacitating them until they make their save and break free. Same caveat as with Hideous Laughter. This is a wisdom save based on our intelligence spell DC, so choose your targets wisely. Level 15, we'll stick with Rogue to get another ASIR feat. Here we should take the Alert feat and finalize our Spidey sense. This gives us a +5 to initiative, giving us a 10 total. Makes it so we can't be surprised while conscious, and other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against us as a result of being unseen. Our Spidey sense is in full gear, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Barbarian's Danger Sense ability. I would have obviously loved to get advantage on dex saves, but getting a 13 strength to multiclass into Barbarian would spread this build way too thin. We're already multiclassing into 4 classes. A 5th, along with weaker stats, is just too much. But with max dex, alert, evasion, uncanny dodge, and expertise and perception, I think we have the Spidey sense covered pretty well. We get another spell known, which can come from any school, so here I'll recommend the new Vortex Warp, my second recommendation from Strixhaven. This allows us to teleport other creatures, both enemies or allies. Given our low intelligence and the nature of save or suck saving throws, I would never use this on enemies, using this ability to sling a web at an ally and yank them to safety. No save needed, works every time, and that's what we like. At level 16, we're going to swing back to Fighter for a second level. Here we get the always powerful Action Surge. 2 actions in a turn, remains powerful right until level 20. Level 17, staying with Fighter, we'll get our Martial archetype. Here we should take Battlemaster. There are a few maneuvers that we'll want to round out the battle skills that Spider-Man often uses. First, we want disarming attack. Spider-Man uses his web to rip weapons out of the hands of attackers all the time. And now, so will we, up to 4 times per short rest. Don't forget to add your superiority die roll to the attack's damage roll. Use your web sling or thorn whip or even your fist to attack and add the maneuver, which functions as you firing your web at the weapon and yanking it free. We'll also want trip attack, which we flavor the exact same way, but instead of a weapon, we're pulling the legs out from under an enemy who has to make a strength save or be knocked prone. And finally, we want goading attack to add a little tanking to our battlefield control and damage combat rolls. We add the superiority die to the damage roll and the target makes a wisdom save, and if it fails, the target has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than us until the next turn. Those Spidey quips are simply too good. Bad guys hate us and the people love us. Level 18, we'll jump back into Ranger for a 6th level. Here we get the roving ability that increases our speed by 5 feet, which we want. We also get a climbing speed, which we already have, and a swimming speed equal to our walking speed, which is now a solid 40 feet. Ranger 7, level 19, we get Writhing Tide, which gives us a bonus action flying speed. Unfortunately, it's only 10 feet, but we can hover. This will be the closest we get to web swinging. Try to use it in conjunction with your spider climb ability to really dive into that Spider-Man feel. I wish we could move faster with this flight, with the restriction of needing walls or trees for your webs for the flying to work, but it's not to be. Ask your DM nicely. We also get another spell known. Let's take Absorb Elements to represent Spider-Man's ability to soak up damage and heal quickly from all sorts of damage types. We should also unlearn Entangle since we have Web. You might want to do this at Ranger 5 way back at level 7 and take something like Zephyr Strike instead. This allows us to move like the wind and not provoke opportunity attacks. Once before the spell ends, we can get advantage on a weapon attack roll and do an extra 1d8 force damage on a hit. We'll also get another 30 feet of movement until the end of that turn. All things that work for this character. And finally, at level 20, Ranger 8, we get Land Stride, which allows us to move through non-magical difficult terrain without using extra movement, and pass through non-magical plants without being slowed and get advantage on saving throws against magically created plants. It's movement based, so we'll take it, but nothing great here. We do get another ASI or feat. Let's go ahead and take Sentinel to finalize our ability to control movement and the battlefield. Someone tries to get away from you, you can reduce their movement to 0 by sticking them with some webs. We can also attack an enemy that attacks an ally within 5 feet of us, so that's nice. And that, my friends, is Peter Parker, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, and do all the YouTube things. Thanks, folks, and see you here for part 2 next week.